Hi, welcome to Talking Books and Stuff, the program that talks all about books and writing and stuff. Here's your host, Dennis Rimmer.
Welcome back. This is Talking Books and Writing and Stuff. Today talking about books and writing and maybe some radio and lots of other stuff with Ralph Benmergui from Eastern Canada in Ontario in the Hamilton area. And Ralph has a new book out called I Thought He Was Dead. It's a spiritual memoir, but Ralph, I sense a bit of irony in the title there because, maybe you've been off television screens for a long time. People maybe thought you just weren't around anymore. Was that kind of the idea?
Yeah, because for me, I think I've spent most of the last decade not on radio or television after most of my life being there. And you go, when we used to go to parties, you'd go to a party and somebody would say, "This is Ralph Benmergui," and the person would look at me, and I could sort of feel, maybe I was projecting, but I thought I could feel them going, "Oh, I thought that guy was dead." Because if you're not in the public eye anymore, you're dead. Ironically, the great comedian and political satirist Mort Saul died a few months back at 91, and I saw, Mort Saul dies at 91. And with no sense of irony, I turned to my wife and went, "I thought he was dead."
Right. Me too.
Right?
Right. So
you die in a certain way sometimes, right? You die as somebody who's on your TV set or on your radio.
Exactly. So Ralph Benmergui, your early life, you were born in Morocco, and how old were you before your family up and moved to Canada?
Well, to put it in context, I remember when I was a kid and I'd say I'm from Tangiers, Morocco, and people would say, "Well, what were your parents doing there?" And I'd say, "Well, I don't know, the 500 years of hanging out, mostly." But yeah, I'm the youngest of four, and we moved from Morocco to Canada in 1957, and I was 2. And the reason we moved was in the North African community of Algeria, Tunisia, and Morocco, the French had held colonial power for quite a long time. And that colonialism ended. It ended in a very bloody way in Algeria, which was considered part of France, literally. But in Tunisia and in Morocco, it ended much more peacefully. But at the same time, Arab nationalism was rising. Gamal Abdel Nasser, if you know your history as it were, was the sort of Egyptian champion of pan-Arab nationalism, because they had thrown off the yoke of not just the British or the French, but also of the Ottomans, the Turks. And so they were really feeling it. And Israel was becoming an established idea as opposed to, well, we'll just declare war on them and they'll disappear. So with that, there was a rising tension between Muslims and Jews that had not really been there for a very long time. And with that, it was very uncomfortable for Jews to stay. So of the 260,000 odd Jews in Morocco before 1956, today there are less than 2,000.
Well, so that's a vast, what do they call it, a diaspora? Now, the mid-50s seemed to have been a time when a lot of people came to Canada. I know lots of people from Hungary came in about the mid-50s. And so what was going on that, I guess, it kind of attracted a lot of different people to Canada at the same time?
Well, it was a generous immigration policy, for one thing. You didn't have the kind of, shut your borders to everybody kind of thing. You also didn't have the kind of barriers that we've put in place so that you have to come with a certain amount of money, a certain amount of education. We don't want to have to upskill you. Toronto, for instance, had 500,000 people from southern Italy that immigrated to Toronto, and the vast majority of them have very low education and very low skill sets, and they built this city, and and their children have flourished in every aspect of society. So I think the 50s were a more generous time for immigration, and we're going to have to rethink that, I think, given that we're going to see in the next 20 years climate refugees from all over the world.
And, without getting too politicalized, there seems to be a problem, in my mind, with people with substantial engineering, medical, technological skills being denied jobs because they don't, pass the Canadian exams or meet the Canadian qualifications, which seems a bit prejudicial, in my opinion. There's lots of people out there who can help. I mean, a broken leg is a broken leg, no matter where you learned how to treat it. So,
True enough.
So you call yourself a Sephardic Jew? Well, not call yourself. Well, what is a Sephardic Jew?
Right. I don't really have a choice. It's kind of what I am. So there are two major branches of Jewish life. In North America, 97% of Jews are Ashkenazi Jews. And the easiest way to do that is to say, did you see Fiddler on the Roof? And the person says yes.
Yeah.
And you go, that's an Ashkenazi Jew. That's an Eastern European, Ukrainian, Polish, German, Czech, Hungarian, Romanian, Lithuanian. That is the Ashkenazi diaspora. The Sephardic is the people who went from Spain and Portugal into the Ottoman Empire and North Africa. The wealthy Sephardic community of Spain and Portugal. And not to get too into the weeds, but in 1492, the Catholics had defeated the Moors and owned Spain, as it were. And the deal was, if you didn't convert to Catholicism, they'd kill you. Or you could leave, one of the two. So the Jews of Spain, who had lived with the Catholics and the Muslims, the Moors, for a golden age of cooperation and a transfer of Arab and Muslim culture, including mathematics, science, and astrology. All that was transferred through Spain, the Jews telling the Christians all the knowledge that the Muslims had and putting that all through Europe. But that all came to a horrible end, and our people went to Morocco, and the rich went to Amsterdam, the rich Sephardic Jews, and from there they went to New Amsterdam, which was New York. Mm-hmm. And if you go to New York or Montreal, you'll see Spanish-Portuguese synagogues, one in each place, that are 400 years old, because the merchants who came from the Netherlands were Sephardic Jews. So that's who we are. In the case of my family, we spoke Spanish at home, and the way we sing our prayers is much more like the Islamic kind of liturgy and the way they sing than it is the European one.
So you still speak Spanish a little bit, do you?
You know what I do? Because Canada, like I said to my mother, why did we come here? Like if we'd been from southern Morocco, we would have been speaking French at home. I said, and there are Moroccans in Quebec who speak French, Moroccan Jews, and Moroccan Arabs who speak French. And I said, what'd you bring us here for? We should have gone to the States. Everybody speaks Spanish in the States. It was hard to really maintain it. So what I do now when I'm walking the dog or thinking aloud, I try to think in Spanish and speak in Spanish to just maintain my connection to the language, because I love being able to think in two different languages.
Yeah, it's very hard. If I'm trying to learn a language, I always have to translate to English and then back again. It's difficult for me. Early life, you came to Canada, like you said, when you're 2. Went to school with a bunch of other Canadian kids, or probably lots of immigrants, I don't know. And
yeah,
you changed your name sort of from Raphael to Ralph, kind of to fit in?
Yeah, because we moved 7 times in the first 8 years we were here. We moved from downtown housing projects, Kensington Market in Toronto, and then finally kind of to Bathurst and Eglinton, if people know the city. But yeah, for us it was a journey of doing that. And my mother would dress me up in, Urkel style. She would pull my pants up, way too high and make me wear a bow tie because it was the first day of school. And I'd be mortified, and then they'd butcher my name. They'd go, and is Raphael Benmergui here? And I'd be like, oh my God, this could not be more embarrassing. So by grade 4, I noticed that there was a teacher at our school, a Scottish teacher, whose name was Miss Ralph. And then I noticed on TV that there were TV credits of people that had the name Ralph. And I thought, well, I want to fit in, because kids want to fit in. They don't want to stick out.
Right.
So I abandoned my name of Raphael. And now when I tell people, they're like, oh, that's a beautiful name. I go, well, in 1958, 1963, that wasn't a beautiful name. That was, people they wanted you to be a McPherson or a McDonald or O'Reilly, Yeah. They didn't want you to be Raphael Benmergui, spelled weirdly. So, yeah, I regret it now, obviously.
Oh, well, we can't go back. That's the thing. We can't
go
back.
No, we can't.
So, moving ahead in the life of Ralph Benmergui, you started out after high school and stuff, stand-up comedian at Yuck Yucks and places like that. Can you remember the first joke you ever wrote?
Oh, my. It might have been about the Flintstones. I think it was, have you ever noticed that Wilma has no eyes? She just has 2 dots? Because if she had eyes, she'd notice that Fred's been wearing the same suit for 17 years. I think that was my first joke.
I think I read that in the book. That's right. And then you got into radio. How'd that come about?
That was an accident. It's interesting because we have a society that's so focused on, there are governments that say a post-secondary institution will get money if the person who takes the degree or the diploma goes directly into that line of work, then it was all worth it. But a person who takes, 17th century French literature is wasting their time, and you shouldn't be funding those programs. I totally disagree. I think you learn how to learn, and you learn how to think when you go to post-secondary. And you're going to have 5 or 6 careers. I worked in post-secondary for 5 years, and you're not doing anybody any favors. 1 out of 4 students in a college, as opposed to a university, already has a BA when they come for their degree or their certificate in college. They're just refining their skills and pivoting to where the work is. So I think I say that because I never thought, oh, I should go into radio. But I kind of stumbled into it from Yuck Yucks. My best friend ended up as the station manager for the Ryerson, what was then Ryerson Polytechnic, had a radio station called CKLN. And he was the station manager. And I had decided I didn't want to stay in acting and stand-up and all that anymore. And my sister was in journalism there, so I thought, oh, well, maybe I could like journalism. And I started to realize, oh, I'm made for this. This is what I really want to do. Which I was 27 by then, right?
Right.
And I thought my whole life I was going to be an actor or a stand-up. That was going to be my life, right? So, things change. And so I ended up saying, well, my sister said, you got to get practical experience or they won't even look at you for journalism school, for J school. So I thought, I went to my friend and I said, Anton, I want to be your news director. And he goes, well, you don't know what you're talking about. And I said, I will create a 1-hour news magazine show for you. I will find 4 hosts, I'll do 1, to do it every morning for us. And I will become the news director. And God love him, he said, okay. And he even gave me $100 a week to do it. And I loved it. I didn't realize how much I loved radio, how intimate it was, how direct it was, how you really, you create images in people's minds, how it's a hot medium, right?
Right.
So that's how I ended up in radio. And then after that, I went to the CBC.
Yep, and the rest is history. Your television career, was how many years was the Ralph Benmergui show on? Was it a daily or a weekly?
Well, I had several different TV shows, right? So I did midday for a few years. I did Friday night for 2 years. I did Benmergui Live on News World for 5 years. And I produced 2 different television programs for the CBC as an executive producer in television. And one of them won the Yorkton Short Film and TV Festival Award for Youth Programming, which I went to Yorkton to receive. So that was fun. Because my wife had been a television reporter in Yorkton for a brief period of time. So I said, you got to come with me and just show me around town. We went there in the end of February, so that was some fun.
That was fun, I'm sure. Not. But
not. Yeah.
So the years came and went, and all of a sudden one day you had the beginning of a heart attack, or what seemed like a heart attack, and then that led to lots of different changes. Can you recall those moments for us?
Sure. Well, the book, I Thought He Was Dead can have a lot of meanings. So the book starts with me waking up to go work as a morning show host at Jazz FM, the national jazz radio station. So I did the morning show from 6 to 9 Eastern time, and I was getting, 5 in the morning, and I'm getting out of the door, and it's cold, it's winter. And when I took a breath in, I really felt pain in my chest and thought, what is that? Mm-hmm. And I hadn't felt that before. So I ended up going to a doctor and a cardiologist eventually who said, what you've got is angina. And they did stress tests, and I failed them miserably. And then eventually I slowed down to the point where I was, hardly moving. And they said, you got to go now and get an angiogram so that we can, see if there's anything, what's wrong here. And it ended up there were 2 arteries that were almost completely blocked. One of them is the LAD artery, which is commonly called in the business the widowmaker. When you hear about somebody who has a heart attack and they're dead before they hit the ground,
right?
That's the LAD, and I was 95% blocked. So surviving that, I got three stents put in my heart. I hadn't had a heart attack, but surviving that, was a really powerful wake-up call that this is not a rehearsal. This is what you keep, we talk about, one day I'll retire and I'll go do this, or, maybe in 5 years it's not a rehearsal. This is it. And you have to start appreciating things. And I'd always been somebody who'd come from a religious family, religious background, not an orthodox background, not an extreme background. When you say the word religion today, people weaponize it and think that you're irrational and too extreme and, literal and fundamentalist, and none of those things. I'm a progressive person who believes that we have a spiritual life. I do work in spiritual counseling with people, and spirituality is about the relationship you have to yourself, to the other person, and to this world and this universe that we're floating around in. And religion is just an attempt at a fitness program. I mean, you can't get a 6-pack abdomen if you don't go to the gym. You can want one. There's a day get one.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
But religion is a way of saying, so in Judaism, for instance, every week is another opportunity space to have a Sabbath, from a Friday night to a Saturday night, where you just put the phone down, stop running errands, don't shop, don't do business, just chill, just hang out with your family, power down, imagine if the whole world actually had a Sabbath. I remember when they made Sunday shopping legal in Canada.
Right.
And I thought that's horrible. Like, all these people now have to work on Sundays when they could have been with their families, and now every day is Tuesday. Every day is too many people out shopping all day long, for stuff, half of which they don't need. The second biggest business in America is storage, for God's sake.
Oh.
Right?
Right.
So for me, all these things they were always in my mind, but after that event with angina, and the next year I ended up also having cancer that had to be taken care of, and radiation. From there, it just became obvious to me that it's not good enough to just wait around. We need to start cultivating our lives. And as I got older, I realized we also have to start valuing our worth as elders. In white society in Canada, we don't talk about elders. We talk about seniors. And they get discounts at Shoppers Drug Mart.
Right.
I'm not a commodity. If I was wearing flowing robes and said I was from a different culture, you'd call me an elder. But we should respect the elder in ourselves and in other people, and really look for the wisdom that those people have instead of shunting them off to the side and then putting them in long-term care. It's just not a good thing.
Not at all. And Ralph Benmergui is with us. I Thought He Was Dead, a spiritual memoir. So what's the meaning behind a spiritual memoir?
Well, I think the book is done through a spiritual lens. Mm-hmm. It's not, no matter what I'm talking about, it's about the bigger question. And I think that spiritual is a word that people are shy of. They just think, so I was doing a workshop with a group of men, I think it was 13 men, on aging to saging, how you turn your aging process into becoming a sage, into your saging process. So you cultivate your wisdom and share it with people around you and your family. And one guy at the beginning, he says, big burly guy, 72 years old, successful lawyer, and he says, is this going to be a bunch of airy-fairy stuff? And I was about to answer in a way that would reassure him that it wasn't, and I thought, no. And looked at him and I said, yes, this is going to be a bunch of airy-fairy stuff. And he ended up being one of the most successful people in the group in terms of what he got out of it. He reconnected with a son that he had a really hard time with over the years, and he really appreciated that he didn't have to be a full-time lawyer to still have an identity, and that he could become a mentor to other lawyers. And yet he started off with spirituality. That's a bunch of woohoo, isn't it? That kind of stuff. Exactly. And we got to allow ourselves to be spiritual beings, not just financial beings or secular beings.
And the book, like I said, is I Thought He Was Dead, a spiritual memoir. Why now? Why was now the time was right for you to come out with this book?
I don't know. I think that it was the right time for me. That years earlier, somebody had asked me if to write a book, and I think I was in my 40s, my early 40s, and I wrote something, but I wasn't happy with it. I just thought, this is not time yet. You need to live more life, and if you're lucky, and reflect, more, because you don't have anything interesting to say. As far as I could see, I didn't have enough interesting to say. And now I'm in my mid-60s, and it just seemed like it just wanted to come out of me. I just wanted to talk about these things. And it was prompted initially by the idea of autumn, that we have seasons of life, and I'm in the autumn of my life, and I didn't want to back into it. I wanted to walk into it, my eyes open, and I want people to do that. I don't want them to be ashamed of their age. Like, you ask somebody their age, and it's like, ooh, that's a bit personal. It's like, it is? It's just your age.
Right.
You know, like, what are you ashamed of? You know, there's a ritual we do in our Sabbath on a Friday night where we go around the table, and I have an egg loaf, a challah loaf of bread. And in the Moroccan tradition, you don't cut the bread and hand it to people in a plate. You rip off a piece and you dip it in salt to remember the tears of slavery and exile, and you throw it. You throw it around the table in order of age. Now, if you're with your family, doesn't matter. Everybody knows each other's age in a family, right?
Right.
But when you bring people together who aren't family, you have to turn to the person beside you and go, how old are you? And they're like, I'm 52. So, thank you. How old are you? Because they got to figure out from oldest to youngest how to throw the bread. And you've broken a huge iceberg at that point of nobody talks about their age. And then you have people do blessings around the table, and somebody will turn to their wife and say, I just want to bless my wife. I know we've hardly connected this week. We've both been so busy, but I just wanted to say how grateful I am that I'm married to you and what a wonderful mother you are to our kids. So that when we finally start eating, we're not talking about the latest Netflix binge watch. We're actually engaged with each other as real people. So to me, that's a spiritual life. That's a salty, interesting, meaty life. I like it like that.
And there's a section in the book, I Thought He Was Dead, where you talk about isness. And I'm still trying to understand what that really means. Maybe you can enlighten me.
All right. So I'll give you the example right now. Right now, there's two things that people are not willing to accept as things that are, that this just is. But one of them is there is a group of people who are not willing to accept the pandemic. They're refusing to accept the isness of the situation. This is a pandemic. It's not, something else. And it's, people who walk around saying it's a hoax. Now, if any of the people listening think it is, I'm not going to argue with you. It doesn't matter to me. Science doesn't care if you have an opinion. Viruses don't care if you're in a political party. So I'm agnostic to that conversation. But what I would say is that the way they're coping is to say, I can't accept this. This doesn't exist. This isn't, not this is. Climate change. We've spent, I don't know how many years now trying to kick it down the road and pretend it isn't. If I lived in BC right now, I'd be thinking, this is.
This is.
It's biblical.
Right.
Right? Right? It is, and yet we can't accept it. It isn't. So we can't accept them. There's a whole group of people, God love all of them, who are getting their paycheck from carbon economy. And until you can give them another way to get their paycheck, they can't afford to think this is. They can only afford to think this isn't. Because how are they going to keep the fridge full if they accept it? People who are in a traffic jam, and they're just like, oh man, like get out of my way, I gotta get somewhere. And they're moving from lane to lane trying to, get 15 feet further ahead. Mm-hmm. They're refusing to accept what is. Without them, there is no traffic jam. You are the traffic jam. It could only happen because you showed up and everybody else showed up. So just accept what is, put some nice music on the radio, and accept that there's going to be a 20-minute to half-hour delay on your ride home, and relax. That's what is. But if you're better than this, it's their traffic jam. I'm better than their traffic jam. Then you'll drive on the shoulder as long as you can, hoping that the RCMP doesn't pick you up.
Exactly. So yeah, it is. You live in the moment and just try to.
Well, you accept what, and you accept what is. You stop trying to think that you're better than, you're exceptional to what actually is. Now, Eckhart Tolle talks about this in his Power of Now book. He does it very well.
And Ralph Benmergui, I Thought He Was Dead. You're a spiritual advisor, spiritual director. What does that mean?
I am an ordained spiritual director, which is a horrible title, but really it's about spiritual companionship and spiritual counseling. So part of my practice is to be able to work with people one-on-one. And for those, so one of the first things we talk about is God, the G word, right? And when you talk to people about God, I'm not asking them I'm not telling them you have to believe in God. I'm asking, where's God in your life? Is there such a thing in your life as God, or do you call it something else, or is there nothing? Are you an atheist? Whatever. And often I will get a client who'll say, look, to get things straight here, I don't believe in God. And my question is, well, okay, tell me about the God you don't believe in. And in the end, they often describe the one they heard about when they were a kid, who sits on a throne, has a white beard, is a white guy, on a throne with a beard and a naughty and nice list. And I said, no, that's Santa God. That's not actual. So I try to talk to them about getting a more nuanced view of the bigger picture than themselves, and try to connect them to the part of them that is in relationship to how they are as a person, but also how they relate to other people. You know, you go on social media and because people can't be seen, they say the most horrible things to each other. They would never say in a room together, and if they did, they'd be a horrible person there too. But we've lost that humanity to say. Martin Buber wrote a wonderful book called I and Thou. And you can either have an I and it relationship. So, Dennis, what use are you to me? And the only reason I'll talk to you is because you're of some use to me. Or I and thou, which is what I believe is that there is a divine spark in everything and in every person. And so what I'm trying to connect is my heart to your heart, not my brain to your brain, my heart to your heart, so that I can see you as a person. Even if I don't agree with you, there's no reason for me to be inhumane in my way of speaking to you. Curiosity is a better thing than winning an argument. If you were genuinely curious about someone, even if they have a diametrically opposed idea than you have about something, then you can hear the yearning they have for something underneath it. So, you know, you can say, oh, them in the States right now is so polarized. So they're a Trump supporter, they're an idiot. Or they're evangelical, they're an idiot. I went to one of the biggest evangelical churches in the state, Joel Osteen's church, to do a documentary, part of a documentary. Mm-hmm. And everybody I knew was like, oh, those guys are crazy, you know. And I said, no, I'm going down there with an open mind, not, oh, they might convert me. That's not the point. The point is, what are they yearning for? And these 35,000 people who showed up for the weekend were yearning for community, for family, for shared values, for hope, right?
Right.
And that's what they were yearning for. So if you can deal with that with them and do it in your own way, you don't have to do it their way, but with some respect towards each other, that's a spiritual life. So to me, I try to encourage those better angels of who we are. And I help them with meditative techniques and guided meditations and soul trait development, which is an interesting offshoot of Judaism called Musar, which is, you know, patience, humility, silence, kindness. How you spend time with these things and try to cultivate them in yourself to become a better spiritually whole person. So that's really what it is.
And before we wrap it up, Ralph, you have podcasts, Not That Kind of Rabbi, and another one with a title I can't pronounce. Maybe you can tell us about those.
Yeah, okay. So the one, Not That Kind of Rabbi, is my own podcast, and I interview all kinds of people on that. And it's available anywhere. Just look up Not That Kind of Rabbi, and it'll show up on Apple and Spotify and all this other stuff. And I think I've got about 70 episodes of that. Some people are artists, some people are spiritual thinkers, different people all the way through. I also do one for the Canadian Jewish News called Yehupitzville, And Yehupitzville in Ashkenazi Yiddish culture, the way it's used now is somebody says, "Oh, this guy, he moved to Capel," and Capel, that's like Yehupitzville, right? It's like middle of nowhere, right? He lived in Regina, now he's living in Capel. Okay, the original meaning was the exact opposite. It was Jews from the Pale of Settlement in the Ukraine, who, little shtetls, little villages, would move to Krakow or Kiev. And that was Yehupitzville to these people. It was another planet, high urban culture, right?
Right.
So really it's about moving far away from where you are. So I speak to Jewish people all across Canada and sometimes in other parts of the world about being Jewish in small town Canada. And it's a lovely thing. I enjoy it. And if people want to know anything about the book or this or the counseling, my website is just ralphbenmergui.ca. So they can find anything about that there.
That's right. Ralph Benmergui, and it's Ralph, R-A-L-P-H, and Benmergui is B-E-N-M-E-R-G-U-I. The book, I thought he was dead, and he most definitely is not. So we thank you very much, and we hope people look into the book and tune into the podcasts, both yours and ours, and hope we meet again sometime.
I hope so, Dennis. Thank you for taking the time to talk to me. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you for visiting with us today. This is Talking Books and Stuff with Dennis Rimmer. Contact him at dennis@talkingbooks.tk. Thank you, and may all the good news be yours. Oh, and don't forget to check out his book, The Great Canadian Notebook, available across Canada and at amazon.ca.